Hello, my friends. David Parsons here. Welcome to News Trap for Friday, November 14th, 2025. Just a quick reminder before we even get started that this program is entirely listener supported. So if you've got an extra $5 to pitch us every month, you get access to our whole archive, which at this point is a massive library of bonus material. And I have to say, I'm proud of what we've produced. There's a lot of stuff on there, and a lot of it features my good friend and co-host, Justin Rogers Cooper, spilling his knowledge, spilling his takes for years now. And I love hearing what Justin has to say, and I know lots of you do too. So let's get started because Justin is with me on the Zoom right now. Good to see you, Justin.
Do you like caffeinated rants? If so, Nostalgia Trap might be for you.
Edging on the paranoiac. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I am proud of what we've put together because I do think, and this is not a plug, although I guess it kind of is. But after doing this show for so many years, I do think we offer something a little bit different in terms of perspectives on what's going on. So, with that in mind, let's talk about Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah. Who? Oh,
Yeah.
I haven't heard the name before.
Well, Epstein is once again in the news cycle, and like I said, I feel like the Epstein news cycle comes around every few months to give us a little bump of adrenaline, and a very common kind of phenomenon that we've seen now for God more than 10 years, which is sickening that I've spent this much time thinking about this, but there's this feeling of like, oh, Donald Trump's done for now. That's it. He's a goner, and then like it just kind of goes away, and everybody forgets about it a week later. And that cycle is happening right now. And yet each time it feels a little bit different, and it feels a little like you can almost get convinced, like, oh, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the one that brings them down. But what's your read on this? Because we've been sharing some of the screenshots. I think some of the more not even salacious, but kind of, I don't know, uh, intriguing, I'll put it that way, emails from Jeffrey Epstein to various figures, including our pal Noam Chomsky, which we can get to as well. But what do you think, Justin? Is this it? Is Trump a goner now?
No.
Yeah.
Worse stuff would have to come out. And I'm also of the philosophy, and I think there's a few New York Times comments that said this pretty eloquently in the last week, but I'm of the philosophy that um, the videos could come out of like Trump with underage girls, and that might not do anything. Because people are just going to say it's fake or whatever. It's going to be rationalized
AI.
a
Yeah.
different way. And I think we need to kind of wrap our minds around like the meaning of Epstein, the person, the meaning of like Trump's involvement with Epstein, and sort of the meaning of this like his public hysterical moment. Like we need to track all those things kind of separately and interconnected in order to like actually figure out like what this means. Because as you just said, like on Nostalgia Trap, I don't think that we're here to like proscribe like a set of strategies or tactics in which an actual political politician, politico, whatever could like actualize like Trump's ejection from office. I think we're trying to do something different, which is like to interpret the kind of the meaning of this, and also put it in some kind of historical context. So like one thing that I would sort of say is like why not just touch on some of the most salacious stuff that came out just to like know that this is it. This is as far as it's gone.
Yeah.
And maybe this is as far as it goes. So for example, um in one of the emails, I think from Epstein to Maxwell, he says something to the effect of, Trump spent hours with the victim, which was, highlighted in all of the news images, like when we reproduce these emails, like that Epstein refers to his own trafficked girls as victims, which is just interesting.
Or
Um,
well, is that true, or did they just like put the name over it? You know what I mean? Like
oh,
they
okay.
redacted the name and put victim there. I think that
Oh,
yeah, because that would be really weird if
okay,
Epstein
okay. Well,
literally is
then
like
that
yeah,
I'll quit interpreting it that way because
yeah,
I saw that and I was just like, damn. And I think I might have been misled on social media. But the point is, the heart of the email was that he's saying that Trump spent time with this person, which I'm assuming was Giffrey,
yes, the
um,
girl who killed herself
the
last
woman
year.
who
Yeah,
died by yeah, and that's like, and she's a separate uh person for us to reflect on. And there's like a wave of articles coming out not only about her book but about her reliability around some of the other trafficked girls and women,
for sure. Yeah,
and their
it's a
testimonies.
deep dark story, dude.
Yeah, it's a really dark story. But the to the extent that it involves Trump here, it places Trump into the scene, which we kind of already suspected, but confirms it. And then in like either in that email or a related one, there's this idea, this moment where, um, Epstein is asked to stop, and Maxwell are asked to stop trafficking girls from Mar-a-Lago. And so it's kind of like, whatever we know about or suspect about Trump's involvement with some of the women or girls, which at this point, again, legally is just implied. It's suspicious. There's no smoking gun there. There really isn't, legally. But we do know that Trump was aware that Epstein was trafficking girls. And so some of the comments are kind of like, why don't we just stay with that? Because that's bad enough. Like that far exceeds Watergate. That far exceeds the Lewinsky scandal. Like, so just a presidential candidate or president, like a person in political power who didn't think it was like either morally or legally appropriate. So in other words, like he was aware of trafficking activities and didn't call the FBI. So like in other words, like that itself is disqualifying in terms of moral character.
Yeah, and I think
Um,
he said that in interviews where he was like, "Yeah, I mean, Jeffrey used to he hired some of the girls. He hired some of the girls that were working in my massage studios at Mar-a-Lago, and I told Jeffrey, you got to stop doing that, man." And it was just
yeah,
sort of like he was so casual about it.
yeah, and is it Catherine Levitt, the spokesperson, who's kind of like, see,
Caroline, yeah,
yeah, Caroline Levitt. She's
yeah,
like, see, like he did the right thing, and it's like actually the right thing might have been, excuse me, calling the cops. But anyway, of course, we know that that wouldn't have done anything either. So that's one line, is that like Trump is like intimately tied to Epstein's operation, and Mar-a-Lago is like one of the central sites of Epstein's archipelago of trafficking working class girls, including the island and his Manhattan house, his Manhattan mansion, which is also contains this red room. So like these sites of sexual exploitation, and it's Mar-a-Lago's in there, and so that's just kind of worth grounding as one of the facts of the moment. And then I think something
Mar-a-Lago
else,
is basically like
please.
the gem saloon from Deadwood. You know what I mean? With
Yeah,
yeah,
it's kind of like a brothel. And I thought one of the other interesting things that comes out of that is one of the reasons Epstein's asked to stop. Again, I read this online, so this I can't remember if this is the New York Times or this is just fake news. 'Cause so much shit that's on social media is just complete fake. But the thing that it said was that Epstein or Maxwell had recruited the daughter of like a wealthy member of Mar-a-Lago. And this guy was like, what the fuck? Because it's one thing to recruit like vulnerable working class girls whose lives aren't capitalized and who aren't really valuable to society. And this is this is just like separate part of the conversation to maybe circle back to later. It's
mm.
another thing to try to recruit like someone who's in a capitalist genealogy of like a rich family, a wealthy person, someone who's an heir to property. Like that's a completely different kind of human being in our society. So even if that's apocryphal, it's still revealing as a fiction. And then I think another kind of slice that comes out of this, and I think the banalities we should get to as well, but another like key slice for me that I think is quite salacious emerges out of Epstein's conversations with people like the author Michael Wolff, and other sort of uh, intelligentsia type figures like Lawrence Summers that have this persistent relationship with Epstein right up until the end. I was surprised that he was writing Peter Thiel in like 2018. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like this is really late into like the Epstein saga. But some of the stuff that comes out there is an email that's to Epstein, and it says, you know, in the context of like all this like heat on Epstein, like Epstein's in the news, and the person writes, "It will all blow over. They're really just trying to take down Trump and doing whatever they can to do that." And then Epstein replies, "Yes, thanks. It's wild because I am the one able to take him down." And so, like, then it's kind of like, you know, people want to read into that. And part of the reason I'm marking it out isn't because I think that Epstein had videos or some sort of smoking gun evidence, which for all we know does exist. But it's not, I don't read that as necessarily saying that Epstein's going to grab Trump sexually, like in terms of exposing him. That's kind of a weird way to phrase that, so I apologize.
Yes.
And then, yeah, it's a hard
It's
topic.
all
Yeah,
exposure. Yeah.
it's a hard topic. And then, yeah, I made a mistake saying that one too. So it's a difficult topic.
It's a
So
hard throbbing
yeah,
topic.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I apologize. This should be behind the paywall, actually. But the point that I'm making is, if you look at subsequent emails, Epstein is circling around and around Trump's finances, and he's kind of like just as dumb as the rest of us in thinking that
Right. He could
all
be
these
saying I could take him down through financial shit. It doesn't automatically mean sex stuff. And
it doesn't automatically mean
as
that.
you pointed out on our thread, you know, the sex stuff would you know, again with the pun, but it would expose Epstein to prosecution. So it might be that the financial stuff would be a better way for Epstein to go after Trump.
And it also kind of points to a strange irony or tragedy around Epstein's fall, which is that, you know, the only way to take down Trump was to keep burning himself, and he chose not to do that, and sort of dies doing a different thing or believing a different thing or anxious about a different thing. And so that, you know, is worth kind of pondering, because the evidence points to multiple interpretations. So I think all of that evidence to me is the kind of the worst evidence that is being marshaled against Trump. And to the extent that it matters, we know that the Democratic base all feels a way about it, and we know that the MAGA base all feels a way about it. So to the extent that it matters, it comes down to what we always say, which is, well, what do independents feel like it means? You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
going to be a slice of the population, maybe even 1 or 2 or 3% of like the voting population, not the population as a whole, that this may or may not make any difference to. But it's hard for me to imagine prosecutions will come out of this. It's easier to imagine that if the Democrats win back the House next year, you could probably see impeachments building on some of the stuff here, but impeachments to what end? If they don't take the Senate, it's just another sort of rhetorical flourish that sort of beats Trump and MAGA back politically without actually removing him from office, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, that I mean that's what's on my mind always is kind of like, okay, so what? So what does this do? And I think that's convincing to me is that the only real tangible result we might see from all of this Epstein drama is that it hurts the Republican Party and the MAGA project electorally because they depend on this thin slice of independent voters. In other words, MAGA themselves aren't troubled necessarily by the Epstein connection and probably believe the idea that like, oh, it's just being used by the Democrats as a hoax in the way that Caroline Leavitt and Trump himself have posed it. But you know, it is interesting to in light of the Marjorie Taylor Greene stuff and her kind of like going on the View and saying like, oh, you know, I got lost in a lot of social media disinformation and that sort of stuff, and she's sort of running from Trump and definitely on the Epstein tip, in part because MAGA and that conspiracy, like Pizzagate end of MAGA, has been, you know, their whole thing was like, we're hunting pedophiles and we're going to take out the Illuminati that are trafficking girls and shit like that. That's their whole thing. In fact, I mean, if you're a Californian, you know, like In-N-Out Burger which is owned by I think some like psychotic Christian evangelical people. They do the like trafficking thing. That's a we've mentioned that before. It's kind of weird, but like trafficking, sex trafficking, which is a real thing and a real poison in the society, and I have no doubt done and participated in by elites, has been like a right wing concern, you know? So it's sort of interesting that like MAGA does the needle doesn't move for them at all when there's all this evidence that Trump was at least knee deep in this bullshit. And yet, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a total revolution for them. I think you sent a comment from the New York Times or maybe the Financial Times where someone was like, "Look, they've turned away from like a million things. Like if they're not off the Trump train by now, then like there's nothing that's going to turn their minds." But it does make sense that there is worry. I would think there are Republicans that feel like they're threatened by this. You know what I mean? Like they're not going to win the re-election partly because of this. I don't know what they do.
Yeah, no matter what Trump or Levitt says, it comes at a bad time for the party. As a brief aside, yesterday I read some figures, and it says this is poll numbers, from a reputable national poll. As of November, 68% of Republicans said they approve of how Trump is managing the federal government. So this is more of like a shutdown poll, but Epstein stuff has been in the water for at least the last year or two. And it continues. That figure was 81% in March. So like specifically, like how's Trump managing the federal government? Even Republicans, it's less than 7 out of 10 now from 8 out of 10. That's a pretty significant blip. It says among independents, approval dropped from 38% to 25%. So that means like
Yeah.
3 out of 4 independents are like, fuck this guy's management of the government. And then there's like some sort of like, comeback in the poll. So it says, yes, but despite dips in approval of how Trump is managing the government, his overall approval is steady. So if you ask people like, how's he actually running the government? They're like, not so good. But if you just say, do you approve of Trump? Like just approve of him as president. Right now, it's 36% of U.S. adults approve of his overall handling of the presidency, only down 1% from October, but still 36% that's pretty weak. So he's already down to like the bone as opposed to the fat or the muscle
Yeah.
of like the American electorate, and I think that's interesting. And then circling back to Bannon, a guy who was also having conversations with Epstein well after this period. So whatever you want to say about all of these guys, Summers, Chomsky, Peter Thiel, like this whole Michael Wolff, this whole class of like political intellectual types, which is itself interesting and also notable in part because it's mostly men. And if you go back to Epstein's, what was it, his 50th birthday book, it was mostly, but not exclusively, men. So like he had this like band of brothers that I think is worth reflecting on, in part because some of the people in that band of brothers were gay, and there's no allegations of trafficking, that are to the degree of Trump or Clinton or Prince Andrew, like the people that are kind of swimming in the direct or peripheral associations of Epstein with the trafficking operation. But he had this band of brothers who were kind of like not necessarily all using him as a pimp, but were kind of using him or having relationships with him for other reasons. That's what I actually ultimately want to dwell on at some point.
Yeah.
But Bannon's one of them. And so, Bannon on his podcast the other day says, I love the tone here and the message. He says,
Great. I love this quote.
did I mention that Trump's not perfect? He's an imperfect instrument, but one infused by divine providence. If you didn't have him, you wouldn't have anything. And so his message isn't this is fake news, which is remarkable. His message isn't Trump's innocent, which is remarkable. His admission here is he's our bastard. And that's kind of a winning argument if you look at Democrats too, and Bill Clinton, et cetera.
Totally.
People put up with a lot when it's their bastard, but it pushes the next question, which is, wait a minute, the whole philosophy and the politics behind our bastard is that there's something sort of disgusting and ugly about the people that you elect and also tolerate and promote into positions of political power, and that you're kind of giving them like a very wide moral leash in order for them to conduct and transact a set of policies, a set of laws, a set of bills, a set of punishments, a set of wars that will be conducted on your behalf. And it's kind of like, war is ugly, and it's like Stalinist, like got to break a few eggs. And so I just wanted to share with you a couple sentences from a comment in the Times that I think really actually captured this, and I think it extends out of Bannon's remarks there. And it says, it's from this guy named Charles P. And he says, I believe that if pictures of Trump emerged showing him abusing and raping young women, many would simply shrug their shoulders. Who genuinely believes that we as a country are going to place our moral obligations above the practical considerations and consequences that policy and ideology afford? Most people are only interested in the furtherance of their own political and ideological aspirations and will continue to support even those who commit the most abhorrent moral transgressions to be able to see them come to fruition. Politics is a game where the moral wager ultimately loses out to the promises and practical considerations and consequences such promises consequences policy and ideology hold on our daily lives, excuse me. And the one who makes such promises and is in a position to realize them is often shielded from the most egregious of moral abhorrences in the discretions of those who, while they may care to an extent, do not care enough to surmount other considerations that drive their support. So, like, it's a little wordy there, but he's basically
yeah, it's
go ahead.
it's a fascinating question, dude, and it's one that goes to the heart of even ideas of like Christian forgiveness and like what we expect from each other and what we'll tolerate from each other and what we'll forgive in each other and when we will hold our nose and still support someone. Or this extends to how we still go to Thanksgiving dinner with family members who have offended us. It goes to still watching Woody Allen movies, even though knowing that he's a problematic dude. It reminds me of the Chappelle Show had a great sketch about that Michael Jackson, where they asked Chappelle, in his character, sort of like, aren't you disturbed by Michael Jackson being basically a pedophile? And he sits there and he kind of almost is breaking down in tears, and he says, he made Thriller, man. And like that's just it. And you're sort of like, well, okay, so you're saying that there's a trade-off here, and that there is a value that people give that supersedes their imperfections. But at what point would the imperfections? I mean, is pedophilia not the red line? You know what I mean? Like that's kind of nuts. And like I will say this with Chomsky, the left doesn't seem like they're overly concerned with canceling Noam Chomsky, and maybe that's because he's an older guy at this point and not as relevant to young leftists, I don't think, as he was to us. He's not really in the mix anymore. I don't see him on podcasts anymore. I think he's basically sort of like really almost 100 years old and not necessarily writing and podcasting anymore. But either way, Chomsky's like probably one of the biggest tentpole heroes for the American left and the global left for decades. And yet his association with Epstein doesn't seem like it's made much of a dent. And I would say for me, I was like, yeah, it doesn't look like he was involved in sex stuff with Epstein. But if I saw evidence of that, would that change my attitude? I don't know. These are big questions, dude. But it seems like this is something that we all do, one way or the other, is we sort of like weigh each other's imperfections against the contributions and connections they're making for us.
Yeah, I mean, some of the easy touch points for me is like I believed at the time that Obama was committing war crimes with the drone strikes.
Yeah.
And I remember saying that to a colleague at work, and it was kind of like that. I'm a little, morally offended by that or something. And the colleague was like, he's the president. We have to trust him. You just got to look past that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. And then like the Democrats never believed Juanita Broaddrick. You know what I mean? It's like to believe Juanita Broaddrick, you're like a right wing person, or like you have to be a Republican. Like the Democrats let Clinton off on a lot, and like the Lewinsky stuff is just way different. Like the Broderick stuff is the offensive stuff. The harassment claims from back in the 80s and 90s and the sexual assault claims, those are the worst things. The Lewinsky thing is kind of a lot of smoke and mirrors, but they don't cross the line over to Juanita Broderick. It's never affected their opinion of Hillary Clinton either. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like no one is ever kind of pressing on those contradictions to the point where those folks aren't invited to conventions. And I'm not bringing it up because I'm in some morally superior position where I'm trying to
No, not at all.
lobby for their cancellation.
No,
I'm
I
more
think I'm bringing it
pointing
up to
out
say
that
like I do this too. You know,
everyone does it.
yeah,
And then people selectively also punish. Like there are scapegoats where like certain figures, like the ones we've named here and others, don't take any heat, and then other people are scapegoated for entire other kinds of problems,
right.
who they might have a connection with, but probably don't deserve to bear the brunt of like the public's cancellation. And so like these feelings are expressed and channeled into places, but not always the places that are relevant or productive or supposed to go. And you know, circling back to Chomsky for a moment, I think part of the mystifying thing for me was how poorly he defended himself when confronted by the Wall Street Journal and other periodicals that were. This is like maybe a year or two ago, and we've talked about it before.
Yeah,
But
he was salty about it.
yeah, what do you say about this? And he's like, I don't know on any principle that I need to like express myself to you on this subject. Like he was so angry, and then like it's like, dude, you can't think of any principle. Like this is a guy that's a principled dude,
Yeah,
that we associate with like really staunch personal principles that he's applied to like other political situations. Think about his Vietnam War essay in the what was it, the New York or Boston Review of Books, where he's talking about the responsibility of intellectuals in the time of war and the time of Vietnam. Like he's all about personal principle. And what makes it so weird is that Epstein went through all this legal stuff, and everyone kept talking. And so I think that invites like a direction of conversation or reflection that's not been taken up by the media or really by social media, where like Epstein is kind of treated, I mean, understandably so, rightly so, kind of as a caricature of a person. And his death is treated as like a conspiracy and almost an exclusive conspiracy where
yeah,
people don't actually understand his individual psychology, in part because his crimes are so heinous that they like overwhelm one's judgment. Like, what else should we think about somebody who's committed crimes like these? But the thing is, and I understand all that, but if you don't take a step back and figure out like why was Lawrence Summers talking to him? Why was the people who weren't interested in his like pimpiness, why were they friends with him? And it leads you to realize that he like and I'll just say this. Everyone says like in his relationship with Leon Black or Lex Wexner, the key capitalists that he like did a lot of work for, millions of dollars were exchanged. Everyone assumes that like his tax advice and like his advisement on their taxes and on their finances and their personal finances, everyone assumes that this was a way to launder money because he was pimping girls for them. And that might be true. We have yet to see any evidence of it. That could be true. But like the game that I think is worth playing at this point is actually saying, wait a minute, what was it about this man that even if Bill Clinton didn't go to the island for these nefarious and heinous purposes, what was so attractive about this guy? Like, why did Bill Gates hang out with this guy for so long? Why did Chomsky want to talk to this guy? And it's not just because, and you can like fill in the blank with your favorite conspiracy. He's a rogue agent for Mossad. He's a rogue agent for the FBI. Like he has damaging information on like an elite pedophile ring going up into the highest channels of U.S. government and finance. All of that could be true on some level, but it's actually more interesting to think about the banalities of Epstein, and by that I mean the kind of non-criminal side of his personality, and why this man was like kind of, I guess he must have been, again, I'm not using my personal judgment here, charismatic, intelligent, like well-read, thoughtful, creative. Like he must have been
It's all the
Like,
honestly, dude. It's there's an irony here. It's all the things that attracted those power players to him are the same things that are driving the interest from the public about Epstein forever and all the documentaries. He's a fascinating figure. You know what I mean? Like there's something that he has all of those qualities of a kind of enigmatic guy who's connected to all these people and he loves to party. He's also just weird, in his own way. He's got all those chess boards with all the little players on him. I mean, he's fascinating, and I think that's part of what drives that.
yeah, and like I think the public is much more concerned though with his like the fact that he's like an outsized, like almost like too real to be true, but it's true, like villain. Like
Yeah.
he's one of the worst people that anyone can imagine. He's also like this Horatio Alger type figure. Like he's almost rags for riches to riches.
Yep.
He's Trumpian without Trump's dad. And
Right.
he's very much like Clinton in his personality. Like Clinton is also rags to riches. Like Clinton like kind of worked his way up the
Yep.
chain.
Totally.
And what's and then like once you start to establish that Epstein understood like enough about uh uh the law, enough about taxes, enough about like weird economic shit, enough about the university system, enough about philanthropy, enough about like, he kept in the loop. And then once you establish that, like, look, as much as we might think that they're stupid on some fundamental level, people like Bannon, Lawrence Summers, Noam Chomsky, like these are credentialed intellectuals that in other contexts, independent, institutionalized people have like let those guys climb the ranks. They're published, they have publications, they write books. Like all the people around Epstein, you can't just be like, they're all fucking morons. They might be moral morons in the sense that they don't
Mm-hmm.
give a fuck about other people. Like that's what's clear through all these emails is that like the girls, but also like huge swaths of society are basically just pawns on the chessboard to be moved around and disposed of and discarded of. But that's fucking how leading capitalists think too. That's
Yeah,
how
I was
like
gonna
leading,
say, in order to like climb the ladder into these social circles that are higher up into these class hierarchies, it seems like you do have to become better and better at sort of holding your nose and that thing of like ignoring the nasty shit and sort of just moving up through there without being the person that's calling bullshit on everything. You know what I mean? Because you're not going
well,
to survive in those circles if you're that person.
yeah, one of the things Chomsky says, right, is that one of the most valuable things a CEO does, I think this is in that documentary, The Corporation, one of the most valuable things a CEO does is that they're paid to just press a button that says 20,000 people are fired. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like
Yeah.
they're, and then if you take one out, like you shoot him in the back, another one will take their place because there's an endless chain, an endless pyramid of people who are like in terms of personality and in terms of like conviction and in terms of opportunism, they are more than willing to be the ones to say, well, we're going to fire 14,000 people today. Like it doesn't matter if it's Bezos. It doesn't matter if it's Andy Jassy, whatever the current CEO of Amazon is.
Yeah.
Whoever the fuck's in that role, they're going to hire 10,000 and fire 10,000. And then that's collateral damage. And then it's just one step over to think that these corporations, like healthcare corporations, for example, make life and death decisions. Oh, we're not going to cover that procedure. Okay, 15,000 people are going to die from that. Okay, these are acceptable casualties for profit. And then look at Obama when confronted about the peripheral people, the collateral damage in these drone strikes. It's kind of like, well, maybe you shouldn't have been standing too close to the terrorist. And part of what the Obama administration legalized from the Bush and Cheney administration was uh, if we authorize a drone strike on like a set of militants and you're close enough to the militants to be killed, you're basically like a de facto militant. Like, so it's like you can be innocent of a crime. There's no due process. It might be a violation of international law, but basically you're a terrorist because you're close to a terrorist. And so if you go back and read some of those, findings, they'll basically confirm that that's the logic. And I'm saying that that logic of like break a few eggs or that logic of collateral damage, that's the operative logic of both like the average healthcare CEO, the average US president, and this whole coterie of band of brothers surrounding Epstein. And there's something, how do I say this? There's something like morally offensive about that, but it's like it's the common sense of capitalism. It's the common sense of our political economy. And then it's only really like one step to the side in terms of being okay with causing people to die, firing them from their jobs and livelihoods, and then killing them in explosions. It's really just one little thing to the side to say, um, hey, if you're a working class girl, there's other ways that we can exploit and traffic and use you. We
Yeah.
don't need to just let you die. And actually, there's this like set of kind of horrific services that people like demand. There's like a constant demand for sexual gratification, but also there's a constant demand for the exercise of power over people in sexually compromised situations, which
Mm.
is you can point to like all brothels. You can point to like all sex trafficking. You can point to like all the
Yeah.
women, children, and men that are trafficked around the world for like this kind of sex work. Like it's constant, and it's one of the features of like the black market global economy. It's not that far removed from the cartels. And then I just want to also just add in a few names there: R. Kelly,
Yeah.
P. Diddy.
Mm-hmm.
We can start Bill Cosby. Like you
Yeah.
can start to actually think, wait a minute, the very things that these elites are doing is actually surfacing again and again and again throughout this like pre and post Me Too era, which is that like this is an established ritual of like toxic fraternity, but it's not limited to like the inside grip of Manhattan and DC and Mar-a-Lago and the
Right.
Caribbean.
Right.
This is like a omnipresent, constant feature of capitalist patriarchy. You know,
Yeah.
like this
Yeah.
is structural. This is not this thing we're pointing to is the rule, not the exception.
Yeah. And God, I mean, there's so much there, but like, we had this movement, this Me Too movement over the past several years that sort of focused on eliminating or addressing what was called toxic masculinity, and it took a kind of cultural tone. It also took a tone of um like we're gonna weed out the bad guys and like find them, cancel them, and that will be it. But that structural part of it is so difficult to address, and I can't help but thinking that this idea we have that like there are good guys and bad guys and they're like morally perfect people and morally imperfect people, especially like within these structures, seems really misguided, even just not even from a moral standpoint, but just strategically, if you want to actually effectively address this poison that we're describing. Because, there was a funny moment last week. Maybe it's not so funny, but like some guy passed out in the White House. And there were some pictures of Trump just sort of standing there,
Yeah,
like staring at the
yeah,
camera, like immobilized, not
yeah,
helping at all. And what's funnier, if you watch the video, when the guy passes out, which is something that happens all the time, people pass out during these types of news conferences because it's a high stress situation. It's hot.
yeah.
They're in suits, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The guy was old. He passes out, and Trump just stands there. RFK Jr. literally like looks at the guy passing out and fucking runs, like literally just runs off camera as if he was like afraid that the guy had a poison that he was going to catch, which was really, really funny considering RFK's whole fucking paranoid take on science and medicine. But either way, what I saw a lot of the memes about that online, they showed that clip of Trump just sort of apparently not caring that the guy passed out next to him, not like seeking help. Is he okay? Like nothing, just kind of stood there. Um, and then this clip of Obama from like years ago, he was giving a speech, and a pregnant woman was behind him, and she was kind of like faltering, like she was going to faint. And he was giving a speech, but he turned around, hey, hey, you're right, you're right back there. It's okay, it's all right, it's
Yeah,
okay. And he like comforted her,
yeah,
and like stopped his speech to like help her get like the assistance she needed. And he's like, all right, she's gonna be all right. And he came back to the podium and everyone applauded. And people use that clip to be like, look, this is when there was a good man who was our president. And now we have the opposite, a bad man that's president. And I'm like, okay, I get that there's something like really neat that illustrates that there in terms of just personal behavior and expressing care for people and things like that. But like you mentioned, both of these guys are fucking war criminals. You know what I mean? Like that's what's important about that to me.
From my side, I saw a lot of those Obama comparison memes too, and one of them was like, remember this moment when they passed Obamacare, and it's like his cabinet meeting, and like they're watching C-SPAN, like 20 people in some sort of meeting room, and then when the key vote happens, he stands up and he gives Biden a bro hug, and he goes around, and like all the comments are like look at the tears in his eyes, and like I miss that man, like miss you, baby, like it's all that kind of shit. And then it's kind of like it's what you're describing. It's just complete moral simplification or oversimplification, because it's kind of like, dude, that healthcare system sucks.
Yeah.
Like, it's awful. And then people act like maybe because of the name or whatever other reason that Obama even wrote it. Dude, do you guys remember the other guy that everyone hates now, Rahm Emanuel?
Yeah.
That motherfucker went into a room with lobbyists for like what, 7 or 10 months and produced this, healthcare act. And it's awful. It guarantees profits for these healthcare companies. And it's one of the ironies of the shutdown, in that like the Dems shut down the whole government so these people wouldn't lose healthcare. And on the pragmatic level, I get it. But on like this larger moral philosophical level, it's a horrific system. And like, even if these subsidies stay, the rising costs of these healthcare plans on these exchanges are horrible. It's
Yeah.
The whole system is completely bankrupt. So like it's and if you go back to 2011 too, when that thing was passed, remember where the kind of centrist Dems, the Obama administration, were like, we couldn't have gotten something like single payer or Hillary Care. We couldn't have done something like that. And so everything's about incremental progress, and we're going to push this through, and then it'll be contested to the Supreme Court, and it'll be upheld, and then we'll keep extending it. And then look, that didn't happen. And that argument reminds me of when they let China into the WTO. And they're like, once we integrate China into the global economy, it'll become more liberal, it'll become more democratic. And like, as a
More
case in point,
accountable. Yeah.
yeah, this fucking week, China's like eliminating all the LGBTQ apps from the App Store. And Apple's like, we always, fulfill the needs of the government and the country where we are operating in. Apple doesn't give a fuck about anything in terms of that. And so, like, this communist government in China is like, fuck gay people. And it's kind of like, dude, you know what I mean? And you got to,
Yeah.
that's a whole nother line of thought. But my point is, everyone's compromised. And so when you see these stupid memes, which is the majority of them, 99% of all the memes are just caricatures of thinking. But when
I love that the memes drive you nuts because
they do.
Yeah. I mean,
it just compresses all these complicated issues.
well, they're
into something
religious.
that's like,
I think
it's
as you
a
always.
moral cartoon.
Yeah,
it is
right.
religious.
Uh-huh.
Religious little moral cartoons for secular people in the case of Democrats.
And you
liberals.
share the meme that either verifies your like really simplistic take, or you share the meme that is like the opposite of your, like, look at this fucking asshole, what they say. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
it's the psychology of it is so fucking gnarly.
Clout and
Yeah.
cash back, clout and clapback.
Yeah.
It's just it's all that, and it's all through this ad driven subscription, I guess partly subscription based system that just makes billionaires wealthier and wealthier and wealthier. So it's like the irony of using social media to be like, fuck those billionaires. Like, dude, I understand that you might claim to be using like the master's tools to take down the master's house. Also, one more little.
Yeah. When is that master's house being taken down?
Yeah, it seems like you're actually keeping the master's house going strong there,
Right.
kid.
You're keeping the master's house stocked with underage prostitutes.
Yeah, and all we could keep going back through all the presidents. By the way, I mean every single one of them is compromised in the ways we're suggesting in different categories. But
Dude,
the one
I mean,
the one ringing the
Thomas
bell,
Jefferson, for Christ's sake.
That's who I thought about all morning was Jefferson.
Yeah, like the guy who wrote the Bill of Rights is and the Declaration of Independence is like a fucking pedophile, rapist, slave owner. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like this, these contradictions, and I guess you could call this dialectics maybe, but like those ironies aren't just present in American history. This is what the history of humanity is. Like, Rome was built by fucking psychotic dudes. You know what I mean? Like it goes on and on. I mean, we talked about this politics, right? Because Ta-Nehisi Coates, made that comment about like, oh, big surprise that the Democratic Party can't support democracy when they're doing a genocide. And you're sort of like, well, like a genocide, like there's a lot of other genocides going on right now besides Gaza, but also like the examples throughout American history. I think it was Andrew who was like, Great Society what happened during the Vietnam War. New Deal happened alongside Japanese internment building the atomic bomb. Like these ironies are just and contradictions are something you have to sort of have a more dynamic take about, I think. Like the idea of just pointing your finger and being like, genocide is sort of like it just seems lame to me, honestly. It seems stupid.
Well, and on the one hand, it's absolutely kind of necessary. Like, look, I mean, a part of you is like just happy that anyone cares for anything,
Yeah,
given
true.
that
Oh
given
yeah, or
how
even
transactional
believes anything.
it
Yeah.
all is. Yeah. So
Yeah,
like
I
on that
know.
level, I totally get it, and I'm sympathetic.
Fair
On
enough.
this level of like the trap analysis, though, like on the level of how do you get out of this? How do you
Yes.
change society?
Right.
I think part of the reason I go back to Jefferson too is not just to be like, okay, so Jefferson literally enslaved the trafficked girls that he was raping too, which that sounds like Epstein to me. And then in terms of Epstein's like charisma, his intellectualism, his coterie, his band of brothers, that's an interesting analogy to Jefferson. Although I'm not saying Epstein's a founding father, this motherfucker was tied up with the leading capitalists and politicians of the last 40 years. So he's not Jefferson, but he's in the network that ran the United States for 40 years in a bipartisan way. But the other reason to go back to Jefferson, and I was thinking about this too, is like the minute you're talking about trafficking girls, you're talking about something that's a conversation about slavery. It's a gradation of slavery. It's post chattel modern slavery, right? That's what we're talking about. And it takes a different form than like owning the person in body and in soul.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes the different, like these girls weren't chattel, but there's a whole set of procedures and economics and grooming that goes along with kind of maintaining control, I guess with and without the whip, that goes back to the Jeffersonian era. And the reason I started thinking about it was, if instead of looking at uh, these whole this whole set of crises as a set of like polluted and morally diseased individuals, who of course this is the group, look at it structurally. So in other words, like, what does it mean in a slave society, or in a society in which people like Saidiya Hartman and other people call, the afterlives of slavery? What does it mean in a post-chattel society, like the United States, like a nation grounded in slavery that we associate as a regime of labor, but was in fact a regime of sexuality and gender too, and a regime
Mm-hmm.
of sexual and gendered violence? In other words, like the production of the plantation was not just about tobacco and cotton. It was about trafficking black people. That was a side of it. It's like there's a sadistic side, the side of the punishment, the side of the whip, the side of control. But the kind of dark eroticism of the plantation from the perspective of the master, like this was systemic abuse. Like in other words, once you get past plantation slavery as labor and look at it as like a plantation of gender and sexual violence, you start to see that like the country is founded on pedophilia,
Mm.
but it was a pedophilia in which for the most part, not exclusively, the sort of legal economic system of it was kind of based in this like white supremacy. But what happens when you legally emancipate or try to emancipate like white supremacy or race or black persons like out of that regime? And it never goes away. It mutates and transforms and evolves. So in other words, like what happens when you start to think, wait a minute, the country's founded on racialized sadism that involved mass, I don't know how you say this, structural mass pedophilia.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the country is grounded on in terms of its labor regime that like sends the country into existence. Jefferson just being one person among thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people that participated in that for several hundred years. So from that long nostalgia trap perspective, the sort of toxic glue of the plantation kind of still stinks in the 21st century because you're not really even that far out of it by decades. It's just 3 lifetimes ago. If you go like
Yeah.
a person lives to be 75 or 80, it's your grandparents' grandparent was growing up in a structuralized pedophilia that was racialized. So then the question just becomes, well, who gets trafficked now? And you can start to look at studies that are on um, migrants, but also indigenous people, women of color, and also white women, and to a smaller extent, in all those cases, boys and men as well. And so when you start to look through what's happening now, it's like somewhat less shocking to realize that the way that this system invites powerful, for the most part, men, but not exclusively, but powerful men or men who need to feel powerful. The way that it invites them to exercise dominance over others through a regime of violent pleasure, that's consistent from 1776 to 2025.
Yeah.
And once you start to understand, wait a minute, it's not just like a moral psychosis emanating out of men and these powerful men, but this is actually something the society has been unable to expiate, something it's been unable to exorcise, like in the kind of exorcism sense. It's been unable to deal with this. Then it tells you two things. One is, well, is it something about the economic structures that kind of help to facilitate this degree of domination and this kind of practice of sadism? But also, are there lingering effects of the society's racism that are playing into the mentalities and the
Yeah.
psychologies
Yeah.
here? So in other words, like what never gets brought up with Epstein is like, what does this have to do with race?
Yeah.
And I would actually argue in ways that are like direct and indirect that until we're able to have like a different conversation about where this comes from and also why it's happening, it won't ever end. And the last thing I'll say to that point is, to me, to connect two things happening right now that aren't put together, but I think should be: the moment when they're erasing Black history, the
Yeah.
moment when they're erasing slavery, the moment when they're erasing Jim Crow, is the same moment that Epstein's exploding. There's a denial that slavery happened, and people associate that as like a denial of African American life and African American experience across the spectrum. But the thing that's getting denied isn't just how you treated African Americans, Black people, etc. The thing that's getting denied is that the plantation, in all of its sickness, is still seeding. It's still growing the problem that we're actually associating with Epstein.
Mm. Insane shit, dude. And those connections are why I like talking with you, Justin, because it is the nostalgia trap. And it's connected to a much longer history, and that's what we're trying to do here. And very hard to cut through, I think, the meme world when it comes to the Epstein shit and beyond, honestly. So I appreciate those takes as always. Thank you so much. And thank you, Nostalgia Trap listeners. Like I said, we are a listener-supported enterprise. So go subscribe to our Patreon page if you are interested. We appreciate everyone who supports the show. We appreciate everyone just listening to our ideas, and we wonder what you think. So hit us up on all our social media channels. Send us a meme. We appreciate it. Thanks, Justin. We'll talk to you next time.